and welcome to Duncan Toplis On Air podcast. I'm Caroline Cleary, the Marketing Director at Duncan Toplis, and I'm joined today by Rachel Barrett, who is our Head of Academies and Director at Duncan Toplis. Welcome, Rachel.
Hi.
So today we're going to be discussing the report that you recently co-authored, the Kreston UK Academies benchmarking report, and also looking ahead to the webinar that we've got on Tuesday, the 27th of February. So to get started, to help our listeners find out a little bit more about you and about the subject, can you tell us a little bit about your role here as Head of Academies?
Okay, so I originally got involved in Academies being a trustee at a local secondary academy school, and it's just lovely being able to use my skills to work with the local community. And when the opportunity came along to actually expand on that and become part of the Academy team in Duncan and Toplis, that was absolutely brilliant. It's completely different focus. Yes, we're helping with the finances, but it's very much schools are there to educate our future generation. And it's lovely to be a part of that and to make sure that they're getting the best outcomes by helping them financially.
And before we go into your thoughts on this report in particular, I wonder if it's worth talking through the process, because quite a lot of work goes into gathering the data. How does that all come together?
Right, okay, so while we're doing the academies throughout the year, well, when we're doing the year end, our team put together all the facts and figures, and one of our Kreston members actually gather all the data for all the Kreston group. And it's really good because we actually meet in person. So I travel down to Bristol every year in January, just after we've finished all of the external audits for the year. And we sit and we have a bit of a brainstorming what we've learnt throughout the year from the academies, where we see the trends are, and that part of it is absolutely brilliant, and it really kickstarts what we're doing. We then go off and we write certain parts of reports individually, and then we have one person that pulls it all together, or a couple of people that pull it all together and make sure that it flows. And actually, because we've spent that time together just talking through our thoughts, what we've seen, it actually flows quite well. And yeah, it's a really enjoyable time that we spent down there together.
Yeah, it might be worth just expanding for our listeners and viewers that the Kreston Global is an international network that Duncan and Toplis are part of, and there are a number of independent member firms around the world. Some of which reside here in the UK, and we work really closely with them to put together the report. So it is Duncan and Toplis data, but it's also data from across the UK, so it's really strong and representative of the Academy sector as a whole. What are the key highlights of this year's reports? What should people be looking out for?
Okay, so I think some of the things that stuck out for us was the cautiousness that the academies are showing, and that's probably due to the uncertainty of funding. A lot of them have only managed to stay in a surplus position because of one-off grants that we've had this year, and there's still actually a climb in the cumulative ones that are finding a cumulative deficit. Other things as well which weren't surprising, primary SATs are struggling, and we saw that last year, and that's exactly the same again this year, and they're the one area where we're seeing a second year of deficits, and they just struggle more with being able to find the savings. So whereas the secondaries and the MATs can move resources around a lot better and have that centralisation, they haven't got so many resources that they can make the savings on. And so we are seeing more of a move to MATs for the primary single academy trusts. There's also been a drop in financial performance. So we had quite high surpluses last year, and we're actually seeing surpluses are quite small this year. But that actually, even though we've got those surpluses, that actually does cover up the fact that there's a lot more trusts that are actually in a deficit position this year. So there's quite a disparity between those ones that are doing really well and the ones that are going into deficit in year.
And you touched on there the difference perhaps between secondary and primary, but also about multi-academy trusts and how centralisation has in some ways helped them. What do you think might be the future for the multi-academy trust, the MATs?
So the Multi-Academy Trust, we are seeing a move towards centralisation, and that means that they're then able to benefit from being in a MAT. So when we've looked at our data, we're actually finding that there is the financial savings that we'd expect them to be. They've also started a lot more gag pooling, and that means that they can move resources to where they're most needed. So if you think about schools with that are struggling a little bit, that have joined the MAT, that need that refresh, that refurb, the going into a MAT, they can get that as well. So the gag pooling does mean that they're moving it to the most need, the schools that have a lot of special needs in their schools, they can move it to there. So it's making sure within that trust that you're getting the best outcome for all of the pupils, whatever their background.
And one of the key challenges that was highlighted in the report was around deficits. And I wondered if it's worth you exploring the reasons why we're seeing 47% of schools running a deficit in comparison to 19% in 2021. What are the key contributing factors to that?
Right, okay. I mean, it's interesting this because we've actually seen a stagnation in staff costs. So it looks like we haven't seen that rise in staff costs that we're expecting, but what's hidden there, this percentage of staff costs against all costs, is the fact that all the other costs have increased significantly. I mean, we've had a massive increase on light and heat, which we predicted last year. We have still got that increase in staff costs. It's just, like I say, hidden in overall costs. And we've also seen that, across the board, costs have increased. I mean, we all feel it ourselves in our own pockets, but, with all the political upheaval around the world, fuel prices gone up. We've got an increase in paper costs, increase in food costs. It's just everything's gone up. So although there's a lot more money coming into the sector, the increase in prices is outstripping it.
And I think one of those key facts was around the non-staffing costs increasing by 16% per pupil. And you started off talking about how important schools and education are in our communities and to children as individuals and collectives. What were the Trust's biggest concerns about this?
So, I mean, the Trust's biggest concern last year was staffing costs. Like I say, we are seeing that is stayed pretty static. But one thing, when we looked a little bit more into the data, it would appear that from national statistics, the reason for that is because we've got the more experienced staff that are leaving the profession. So we've got a lot more of the early careers teachers coming in, which are going to be at a lower cost. But actually, overall, we are seeing that's increased the staff costs.
And I think an overall lack of clarity about how pay rises might be funded.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a motivational impact.
Yeah. So there has been an issue with, going for, well, we had that uncertainty right until July this year of what the pay rises would be, and then actually how much of that would be funded. And even then, it was a very cautious, yes, we'll accept this, but we will be talking to you again next year. So again, next year we're going to be concerned about that as well. So yeah, that's a huge issue for our trust. But one thing that we did note this year was there is actually some funding available for early careers teachers, and we would really encourage trust to have a look at that for their teachers if their school's eligible, to be having a look at the grants that are available for those early careers teachers. The funding for those the application needs to be in by 31st of March, so I encourage that to be looked at very soon.
So a big time frame on that, but potentially an opportunity. And I suppose that leads us quite nicely, having discussed some of the challenges the report's highlighted, to talk a little bit about what positive outcomes there have been from what you've found.
Yeah, so positive outcomes, like we say, there has been some cautiousness, and that's actually demonstrates how well the schools have actually managed finances this year in light of everything. So that's a huge positive, that we haven't seen the deficits that we were expecting last year. And actually, schools that are realising that going into a MAT actually might be beneficial for them. So they're starting to work together, collaborate to make sure that they are going to get the best outcomes for the pupils.
And I suppose you've alluded there to what the future might hold. And if you did do your Mystic Meg, what would you be projecting over the next few months will be coming out of the education sector?
Yeah, so the white paper was dropped with regards to the move into strong maths, but actually there is still a push for that. So I think what we'll see is a lot more trust moving into maths, a growth of those maths. We haven't actually seen the number of maths grow, but we have seen more schools move into them. We're not seeing quite as many maths saying that they're going to look into growing the next year, but still 73% of them are. I think last year it was something like 93% were going to move into grow their maths. So I think we'll see that consolidation of those maths, that they're going to be getting the houses in order, as in centralisation, gag pooling, so that they can make the most of being in a mat. Also, the future of the maths, it's what we're looking at in the future of education is that we need to be innovating. There's a lot of change in the world, so the trusts are going to be looking at different ways to educate pupils as well, to make them ready for work. And one of the key challenges we've got at the moment is to do with attendance. So there'll be a lot of work on attendance, getting pupils into schools so that they can actually be educated, because that's been a real challenge after the pandemic. The other thing as well is sustainability. That's huge on the agenda, and every trust board should be thinking about sustainability every decision they make. It's one of the key responsibilities really of our schools is to be looking at sustainability and protecting the world for our future.
So we've talked a little bit around the challenges, and there are many. I wonder if it's worth you sharing what you see as the next big thing, the next challenge that schools and maths need to be considering.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking further ahead, the Office for National Statistics has highlighted that there's actually going to be quite a drop in pupils coming through. So the schools need to be realistic with their budgets and looking to see what the next school role is going to be. And then they're going to have to be looking further ahead for whether they need to maybe mothball some of their estate, or look at that natural, as teachers leave the profession, whether they need to be replaced because of what the pupil numbers that are coming through. On top of that, we've actually seen that a lot of the pupils that are going to be coming through will be from international migration. So there needs to be quite a lot of thought about where you're putting those resources to make sure that you can manage things such as having English as a second language coming into the schools. So huge challenges for the sector to be looking at going forward.
Congratulations again on co-authoring this report. It's quite significant and is a long read. You are hosting a web event on the 27th of February to help people dissect the report. What would you be saying to people who are thinking about attending? For me, it seems like a great opportunity to have this report dissected in a really human way. But what will that webinar bring to your contacts?
Right, okay, so we'll be going through the key findings of the report, and we'll be covering off reserves, also why the balance sheet is why the balance sheet is important, because we concentrate an awful lot on surpluses and deficits, but actually focusing on the balance sheet is quite important as well, and also where we see the future going with regards to maths.
And so I suppose the last part is to summarise where we've come from with it. This is a really well-established report that yourselves and experts across the UK have worked on. Listeners, if you do have time to go on the Duncan Toplis website and download your copy, I'd encourage you to do so. And also to have a look if you can join Rachel on the 27th of February at the webinar. And with that, just thank you so much for coming in and sharing your knowledge today. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. Thank you.